Hey guys, welcome back. So I read this last year, November 30th. I finished it. This is called Caste, the Origins of Our Discontents by Isabel Wilkerson. This is part of the Oprah's Book Club 2020. That's not right. I read it. It was on a list of anti-racism decolonization lists, and it came highly recommended. And wow, I'm so glad I picked it up because I have now 2 copies of this. This is actually my mother's copy. She bought it, even though I have an ebook version, but I'm not showing you my ebook version. And I actually borrowed it on Libby for the audiobook version. You can say hi to Bear. He's right here. Bear, what are you doing? Hi, Bubba. And so I listened to it, and then I bought it because must read. I definitely plan on rereading this. This is Isabel Wilkerson is a Black author. She is a winner of the Pulitzer Prize and also the author of Warmth of Other Suns. I have not read that one, but I'm going to be adding that to my TBR. This book is so fantastic if you want to decolonize your mind, decolonize your bookshelves. And what I mean by that is not just diversifying, but talking about anti-racism, the history, the Black history specifically, but there's a history of classism as well. And this book does a fantastic job of going between the two. It is nonfiction, so I know not everyone's into nonfiction, but I really enjoy nonfiction, and Isabel is a must. Like, I don't want to say it was an easy read. Like, yes, in the sense of understanding the content, but there was also a lot of information where there were so many lessons to be learned, right? Not just with the history lessons, right? But the comparisons that Isabel made between how the Black community is treated in America versus the caste system in India specifically, right? And I believe they're called, hold on, I want to get this correct. They're called the Dalits, right? Or they're recognized as the untouchables. And they are the lowest in India, right? We're talking about the country India, being clear on that. And Isabel was talking about how when Martin Luther King Jr. went to India, right? And he was treated as like a celebrity, right? He was among the wealthy and the celebrities in India. And yet when he went to, when they brought him over to the communities of the Dalits, right? And the Dalits were like, well, you're kind of one of us. And at first, you know, Isabel describes how Martin Luther King Jr. was like taken aback. Like, I'm not one of you. Because he was being treated like a celebrity, right? But they explain that, well, in America, you would be one of us, right? You're seen as less than. Now, I want to make it clear my personal beliefs and me fighting and learning and working towards being anti-racist, anti-bigoted, you know, decolonizing my brain, learning history and all that. That is not my personal belief, but we know that we have ingrained biases, that there's institutionalized and systematic racism, classism, etc. And that is exactly what the Dalits were basically explaining to Martin Luther King Jr., that in America, the Black community is seen as such, right? And the examples that Isabel Wilkerson gave was, you know, she gave quite a few, but I'm going to just name some history, things that I learned because I'm reading anti-racist work, right? Because I'm learning Black history specifically, that we were not taught in schools. You know, I've kind of talked about this in other aspects. You know, while I had a great education, we don't touch on a lot of this. And so one of the examples she gave was, you know, with the pool system, with, you know, whites being able to go to beaches and pools, but the Black community was not allowed, right? And that if they were to step foot in that water, it was then diluted, right? It was considered like poison, right? And they would completely shut this down. Like, this was the segregation. Hey, what is going on with you, sir? But it wasn't just like, oh, the Black community stays over here and the white community stays over here, right? Like, it wasn't just like, oh, you can't use the same water fountains. Like, there was a deep ingrained bias, right? Like, people really thought that if you even use the same door handle, right? For example, like, think of COVID, right? Where the disease can spread. That is how people thought. Like, if you were to touch the same door handle, you're now, you know, considered disease, right? Like you were seen less than as well. And so it upheld the system of racism, because even though, I don't want to say people were necessarily bad, right? But because the white community, while there were white people that were not wealthy, or maybe they were, you know, poor, lower class, right? At least they would say, like, at least I'm not Black, right? Like, it was something so horrific when it's not. There's no there's nothing bad about being Black. There's nothing bad about being Asian, or, you know, other things. But there's a caste system here in the United States, right? And I've observed, right, other communities that are not white, right, but are seen less than by white community members, that, well, at least I'm not Black. And we're talking 2020s, right, 2024 even. And it's like, this still continues to today. Like, it's so ingrained in our history, which is why there's another book that I read, and I'm going to recommend in a different review, that when we talk about anti-racism work, it's not just the personal work that you and I do as individuals, that we have to fight the systems, right? Because we built our country so deeply on racism, right? To the point where, oh my gosh, there was just so much. Like, you know, when you hear the term, well, I'm Black, so I don't swim, right? It's not because there's a deep fear of water, right? Because there are plenty of Black countries, right, or mainly Black countries, that have water, right? The Caribbeans, right? There are islands. There are Black swimmers. But here in America, because they were taught, because they were not allowed to, because of the deep ingrained racism, right? And also, like, not touched on in this book specifically, but I have heard the stories where people would drag black children, black babies, and drown them, and black bodies, and, you know, especially down in the South and the Evergreens and stuff. Like, it's not just there. I'm just giving the example that they're afraid. They're afraid of the water, and I don't blame them, right? Because of the trauma. And so that's past. You okay? So it's passed down generation to generation, right? Because that's what their ancestors went through. And so, you know, this talks about that, right? It talks about how, you know, caste is not just in one country, that there's different versions of it. You know, yes, it's a little bit more obvious in India, but we very much have a caste system here in the United States. Isabel also went on to talk about anti-racism work and how she, as a black woman, when she went to go make speeches, right, and she's teaching, how very often within her work, it was like either she was teaching a mainly black crowd who had the same reservations, who went through similar traumas, who can understand what she's saying, right? So it's just kind of like preaching to the choir. And how she had to talk about the difference in, you know, who the audience was versus if it was a white crowd, especially those that were doing anti-racism work, who, even though you hear these, you know, you may be doing the work or you may be hearing the stories, they're usually white women like me, right, where they try to other themselves, right, where it's, well, I'm not one of those white people, right, well, I'm actually doing the work. But in the same breath, they're asking a black woman for resources. In the same breath, they're not actually listening to what she has to say. In the same breath, they're, you know, not recognizing the harm that they've done, right? And I will say I've completely done this. I don't think it was this book. I think it was a different one that I will be discussing as well. So you'll probably hear me repeat this, but when we're doing the work, often we as white people want to be seen, right? You want those trophies, you want those medals, like you want those pats on the back. Here, you want your medal? You want your medal for doing what should have been done? Here, have your medal, right? When that's not why we should be doing it. And so often, and like I said, I've done this is, you know, it's been my mistake. When we talk about it, we often seek those that have lived experience and like, oh yeah, like I heard this, and like we're like almost trauma dumping what we now know on the community that have lived experience, when we should be seeking out other people that look like us, right? And I mentioned it, like I said in another video, we can't other ourselves, right? Just because we're white and we're doing the anti-racism work and we're decolonizing our... Yes, I see that my dog is trying to take the blanket. I get it. Bear, what's going on with you? Okay. We are still part of that community, right? And when we say things like all men until it's none, same thing goes with the white community. It's all white people until it's none. If you've been around for the bear versus man discussion, right? We as white women are the man in the, you know, the white men versus white women for the black community. This is what they've said. And I know it's hard to hear, right? But we have to listen and learn. So when I'm having these discussions, I'm talking to those of you that look like me. I'm by far not perfect, right? I am learning every single day. And, you know, when I talk about doing this work, yes, there are levels of, hey, journal your thoughts, right? If you're going to be doing anti-racism work, journal your thoughts, journal what you've read, make notes. It's so important. But I also want to note that when you ask, what can we be doing better? We should not be seeking out the Black community for those answers. They did not create the system. We did. Our people did. Right? We have the power. And when I say that in the terms of uphold people, make them accountable. We have to create better laws. We have to call our senators, call our congressmen, right? Uplift other people's voices. Don't overtalk them. You read a book by a Black author? Give them reviews. Talk about that, right? Buy their books. Buy them for other people. That helps. Support their businesses. That's important. Now, if there are Black people, right, that are out there doing the, you know, willing to teach, right, that have their programs, that are willing to have their book clubs and stuff, join them. It's okay if they want to get paid. They deserve to get paid for their work, okay? Their work is invaluable. Don't complain about that. All right? Do not complain about that. You know, and I recommend, like, there's by Day and PJ, they're starting a book club. If you follow them on TikTok, I hope they're on YouTube. If they are, I'll find them and I'll put their YouTube stuff down below. But this was one book that I recommended to them. You know, I know they're two Black women, and this and another book, I was like, hey, I didn't see it on your Amazon list, but these are two fantastic books I would recommend to white people, right? And they thanked me, right? Like, they don't have to read it. I'm not telling them to read it, right? Like, if they want to read it, that's their choice. But for us, right, for those that are listening to them do their work, this is an excellent book for us to read. They already know the history. They have lived history with it, right? But we have to learn to do better. So I think that's really, really important. So I'm going to continue on to say that this was a 5-star read. I'm going to be rereading it sometime this year. Like I said, I did listen to the audiobook version, but I obviously have my mother's copy, and then I have an ebook version. I'll probably be taking notes on the ebook version instead, so that I could take better notes. Anyway, I hope you all have a fantastic day. Make sure you hydrate. I have water, and it's actually my kid's cup, but make sure you hydrate, okay? If your lips are chapped, grab your... I know it's going to be a very hard year. I know today's a very hard day with it being Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And it's also, you know, whose inauguration. Which is another reason why I'm going to recommend books like this. So try to do some self-care. I know we have the day off, but just because everyone has the day off doesn't mean we can't still be learning. Much love to you all, and I hope you guys stick around.